This is Beyond Networking. And now, here's your host, Ron Sukenick.
Welcome to Beyond Networking, Being with Ron Sukenick, and I am Ron Sukenick. Glad that you can join us. If you're tuning in to this podcast for the first time, this weekly podcast is about taking the networking process to another level. And when I talk about networking, I'm really talking about the sharing of ideas, information, and our resources. And we do this on a weekly basis by inviting on what we feel are innovative thinkers and creators that can and do share real strategies and real techniques on how you can be and take your thinking to another level. Now, when I say another level and ways of being, whether you're being with self, being in business, being on a team, or being in a relationship, it makes no difference. Now, keep in mind that the show is built on the premise that you have to be before you can do, and you do to the extent which you are, and what you are is based predominantly on how you think. So let's jump into today's program and introduce to you a friend, an innovator, certainly in the world of high performance. His name is Jim Zarvos, and let me introduce Jim. Jim is the president and founder of Paradigm Consulting International. It's a consulting firm that specializes in shaping high-performance teams and leadership development. He's also the president and founder of Beyond Your Best, which is a transformational coaching curriculum for anyone seeking new levels of personal fulfillment and success. Jim has extensive background in dramatically improving people's ability to lead effectively and communicate and to coach and produce unprecedented results. Jim is also featured in the upcoming movie, The Absolute Answer to Everything, and is working on a book, The Absolutes of Leadership. Jim, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
And look, Jim, I've got a question. I love this, the absolute answer to everything, and I really need to lean on you for something.
Okay.
Why does my 21-year-old daughter keep calling me for money? I'm looking for the absolute answer to this, Jim.
Because you have it, and she doesn't, and she knows where to get it.
That's what I'm saying. Real strategies, real techniques. But no, Jim, it's great to have you. Let's just jump right into this, because
Okay.
I love your work in dealing and taking people to new levels. EE Cummings is an American poet, as we know, and he says you can teach almost anybody to think, believe, or to know, but you can't teach a single human being to be. Do you agree with that?
I don't think I agree with it, and on the other hand, I can appreciate what he's saying. So I agree and disagree with it.
Okay, so give me your take on that.
Okay, so here's where I agree with it. I think we're born as a human being, and I want to define being as the ways that we interact with other people that evoke emotions. So if I'm being loving, I tend to evoke love. If I'm being trusting, I tend to evoke trust. And while I may not evoke it one-on-one from a cause-effect paradigm every single time, I'm going to evoke it universally. So if I give away love, love's going to come back to me. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to love me in this moment. It does mean that it's going to be returned back to me.
Okay,
so when we come into this world, we are a little self, and we are being, and we are passionate, and we are loving, and we are trusting, and we are committed, and we're experiencers. So there's nothing to teach. And then what happens is our mind starts getting in the way, so to speak, and starts jumping in, and your mind wants to learn and keep you safe, and we begin to collect data and form beliefs and form assumptions and have experiences and form concepts, and we begin to create some clutter in our life and collect some baggage, and we get conditioned, and that is what is in the way of being. So it's the process is really about removing the clutter and the conditioning so that you're restored or renewed to your original beingness.
Okay,
so
so
from
that's
a teaching standpoint, yeah, I would agree with him. It's hard to teach being,
so, and
but it's not necessary.
Okay, so I hear you. So I want to be loving for my wife, but in fact, what I want to do is be more loving. So is that just me just being? So what is that process for being all I can be then, going from this good to great?
The process to become better at being, is that what you're saying? Or just...
Yeah, is there this process? Is it somewhat static or is it dynamic? And
well, I have a whole coaching process that I take people through, and parts of it are intensive and parts of it are around forgiveness, and it's really removing and getting. It's two levels. One is getting conscious of the stories, the incidents, the events, the clutter, the images, the conversations that tend to dominate and run our life. And once you start to get conscious of those things, you can make other choices. But
that's good. I like that.
But the other thing is that the easiest way to disappear things are to experience them. And our mind is wired in a way that our mind does not want to experience our experiences. So we rarely experience pain.
Let me understand that. Our mind doesn't want to experience the experiences.
That's right.
Share that a little bit more with me.
All right. Most people are afraid of rejection.
Okay.
And we avoid the experience of rejection. If we would just go ahead and have the experience of rejection, it would disappear quickly. But we set up our lives around the idea that rejection is bad or rejection is going to kill us or it's painful. And so we avoid that experience instead of having that experience. Well, the more we try to set it up to avoid the experience, the more we cause the experience of rejection.
But we accept rejection as a part of, in a sense, being assertive. I'm reaching out to help or to be helped, and I'm accepting that rejection is a part of it, is it not?
Yes, if you're willing to experience it.
Okay, if I'm willing to experience it.
Most people aren't, for example.
Okay, so I've got to become conscious of this stuff.
And then you've got to be willing to experience it fully, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And once you experience something, it disappears.
Am I going through an unlearning process at all to move to new levels?
In some ways, yes. It's an unlearning process, and it's an experiential process. So if you drop, if a baby falls over and bumps itself a little bit, it'll cry and it'll go for it. It'll be physically, mentally, emotionally immersed in that pain. 2 minutes later, you look over that baby, and that baby's usually giggling, googling, happy. Well, you take the same scenario with an adult, and we've learned not to experience the experience. So we have an event or a situation where someone doesn't love us back. We may carry that as an unexperienced experience for years. We may turn that into mistrust, and then take the mistrust and run that tape for years and years. So it really simply just gets back to having a complete experience and learning to have those experiences as they occur.
Wow, I love that. And by the way, getting to this concept of people and interaction, and certainly from a networking and relationship type standpoint, I know people love that joy of interaction, but what's your take on why people are awkward with other people? What is that about?
I think part of it goes back to our conditioning. If you look at being versus doing, I think you're going to see that most of us are rewarded in the doing category. So if you're playing sports, it's your performance. It's what you're doing. If you're at school, it's how you perform at a test. And if you look at our lives as measured by how we're doing, how much money we're making or what we're collecting or how we're performing on a test or at a piano recital, you'll see that for most of us, we don't measure up in the doing because it is not a fixed doing. Even if you hit your mark, there's a new mark. So eventually, your mind catches on that you're really not good enough. And you start to take that on as an identity. So most people grow up with this identity that at some level we failed, we're just not good enough. We weren't pretty enough, we weren't smart enough, we weren't thin enough, we weren't athletic enough, we weren't personable enough, we weren't sociable enough, et cetera, et cetera. And that becomes part of your whole identity. And from that identity, you start to interact with other people. And so that's part of it. And then, another part of it is that starts to influence and impact the ways of being again as we get back to that. So then, as this sort of unworthy, contextual man or woman, when you're with something, you're thinking they can see your unworthiness. So you start to develop sort of ways of being of shyness or withholding or looking down, and you start to interact with people, and we call that your personality. So it dramatically impacts, it's just the normal conditioning, dramatically impacts people's ability to be.
And by the way, you got me thinking the distinction between being and doing. So for instance, if I want to be more purpose-driven, reason for being, that type of thing.
Sure.
Is it more impactful for me? I mean, it seems like it's just more impactful for me to be than it is to do. My purpose in life doesn't necessarily come out of my doing, does it?
No, it does not come out of your doing, but your doing is going to come out of your mind. Your being is going to come out of your soul or yourself. But most people's computers are running their life. So the mind doesn't really get being. The self and soul is what accesses being.
So I got it. So what I've got to do then is when all the leaves fall off the tree this fall, instead of having the kids next door do it for me, I need to be with the leaves. Is that what you're telling me? I need to
Not
be
quite.
Because
I think you can be present. I don't think you can go be with a tree.
Oh, I can't be with the tree. Now,
no, so being is an experience that you create with another human. You can go be with the tree, but I think what we're talking about is being present, or being in grace, or being present to the beauty with.
Yeah, so that's what, in a sense, makes it somewhat awkward. I mean, because isn't it safe to say, from a business standpoint in general, or life in general, Jim, that everybody's kind of caught up a little bit in the past and kind of moving the past a little bit into the future? And so how do you have any hints on how I can be present with people, which, in a sense, removing some of the awkwardness between people? Or am I asking too much in one question?
Well, I think you're asking too much without a set of practices that you would apply, in your day-to-day life.
Okay.
Without knowing really how to do that. But, let's assume that you are practicing, you're doing your meditation or whatever that is. I mean, fundamentally, if you look at a human's problems, they're only in their mind. We only have a problem with the future, and we have a problem with the past. But if you are absolutely present, and if anybody's listening to this call and they're absolutely present with what I'm saying, they do not have a problem. They can only just experience what I'm saying and experience what they're making up about what I'm saying. So we don't have any problems in the present. I mean, so even if the house is falling on top of you, in the present, you don't have a problem. You just experience, and then boom, you're dead. No problem, right? So
I got it. I love that.
Our problem is in the anticipation of consequences in the future. Or our problem is when we're attached to our old scripts and our baggage and our history. And again, we think, well, we're just going to continue to repeat that, or we don't want that. So one of the tricks, I think, is just sort of command yourself to get present. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Breathing, or just sort of telling your mind, hey, just wake up and smell the roses and let's get present here and get centered. So that's part of it right there, is just getting absolutely present and experiencing what's coming up for people. Because you'll be served up thoughts and emotions, and if you'll just experience it, those will dissipate. And then you'll start to feel more grounded, and you'll start to feel more present.
Oh, I love that. By the way, so I hope let's step aside in a sense, but move on over to your Beyond Your Best program, which is a transformational coaching curriculum for anybody seeking these levels of personal fulfillment. So how do you define that, Jim? I mean, I want to get beyond my best. I want to be all I can be. So how'd that all come about, and what do you mean by beyond your best?
Well, we all have different domains of our life that we're operating in. There's our health and our finances and our personal relationships and family. There's our personal growth or spirituality. There's different domains, and different people value those domains differently. Some people, health is everything. Some people, finances is everything. Some people, family is everything. But, for a well-rounded person, you want to basically be winning in all those domains. And you'll have your strengths and you'll have your values dictating. Some will be skewed because you just don't seem to value it as much, and some are skewed the other way because you value them more. But we start with sort of a inventory of where you are in each of these domains, and then so you need to in other words, to get beyond your best, you need to know what your best is or what your currently
okay. So you're setting some expectations. So we all have our limitations, if you will. It's like I'm doing my best,
right?
And then so I'm setting that and having an understanding. Somehow I agree then that how I'm performing is the best I can perform. Is that what you're saying?
Given your context, given your way of being, given your mental models, yes.
Okay.
I'm saying you can go plus or minus that a little bit, but basically you're probably already operating there, and you just have your peak days on top of that.
Okay. So for me to then feel is this is the best I can do, and then for you to take me to beyond my best, so I can be more successful in my life, and I can be more successful in my business. Is there anything that you can share with that gets me now to it's almost like that story that I know we've heard over the years where you train fleas and you put them in a glass jar and you cover the jar, and these fleas have a tendency to bump their heads up against the lid, and then one day you remove the lid and the fleas just keep jumping up to where the lid was. Is that what we're saying or what you're thinking?
Exactly, Ron. And not to go with your analogy, then we cover that up. Like we cover up our behavior with our mantra of "I'm fine." So really, the first step is to let go of the idea that you're fine, knowing full well you're fine. But it can become a dysfunctional mantra for people. How are you doing? Fine. How's business? Fine. How's your relationships? Fine. So everything's fine. Well, that is in the way of going beyond anything further, and it's usually not true for people. I mean, there's for almost for all people who are successful. In fact, I'm going to say for all people who are successful, there is some level of dissatisfaction that drives them. The people that are walking around saying, "I'm fine," they have the same level of dissatisfaction, but they're just covering it up. The successful people won't cover that conversation up. They're like, things could be better. I could be growing. I have X, I could have Y. We're doing great in this relationship, but I know there's work to do. My kids are fine, but, I'd love to spend more time with them. So they're always seeking beyond their current outer dimensions of their life. And that's one of the differences is just what people do around this dissatisfaction. Some people use it to motivate themselves, and some people just don't like the feeling, and they just cover it up, and they just sort of sit back and live with it.
Well, let me ask you this, Jim. I know your work evokes, in a sense, personal and organizational breakthroughs, and you work with very large corporations. I mean, whether it be the J.P. Morgan's, Chase & Company, Career Builder, American Express, Southwest Airlines.
Right.
What's driving them? When does this corporation get to this point? And is it all maybe driven from the standpoint of profits? But when do they get, and how do they get that we need to have a breakthrough? Where are they Where are they getting this passion for doing that?
It usually gets down to leadership, and if you have a strong leadership, you're going to end up with a strong culture, and that strong culture is going to be vision-based and value-based culture. Most companies are motivated by fear, and frankly, most humans, in my studies and in my experience, most of us are running away from pain, and a few of us are running towards a vision. So, the process that you're setting up is basically a process where you accept that duality, and that you're setting up your process so both of those are within that culture. So if you're looking at really strong corporate cultures, you'll see that there's a consequence for not performing, and there's a vision to perform. In other words, they're excited about the difference they can make and what they create and can create, and they're also a little fearful of falling behind or not getting the job done. Those are the strong cultures that corporate America rewards.
Could you share a little bit about your book that you're working on? You call it The Absolutes. Can you share some of the absolutes of leadership, and how would you even define leadership?
Well, that's a question that's been kicked around forever. It's actually going to be a dual book. One will be The Absolutes of Leadership, and the other one's on transformational leadership. And my premise is I'm looking at all the leaders of the world. I'm looking at what's in common, whether that was a Hitler or whether that is a Mother Teresa. What fundamentally is in common with all of those leaders. And then I'm trying to boil that down into a set of 10 principles. In transformational leadership, which is a sort of leadership that I would aspire to, for example, one of the principles of theirs, they care about their people. Well, certainly you cannot make the case in a dictatorship that they care about their people. Many are narcissistic, etc. But one of the absolutes for leadership is they will not tolerate mediocrity. And if you look at any of the leaders out there, they just sniffed out mediocrity, they attack it, and they just raise things to a level of excellence. Another absolute for leadership is leaders raise the conversation. So if you'll notice, when people walk into a room, they're really looking for meaning. So if an incident's happened, let's say there's a quarterly loss, people will look around for why. They'll look for the meaning for this. A leader will take that and he'll put it into a context that raises the conversation to a higher level for the highest person in the room. So they're always raising the vibration of the conversation, raising the altitude of the conversation where there's a lot more possibility.
So now you're moving into this world of what's possible, and so you're raising this level of conversation to the high. Did you say the highest person in the room?
That's right.
What do you mean by highest?
Higher to the highest person in the room.
Oh, you mean as far as their rank or where they are in an organizational structure, like to the president of a company, or?
I would say to their consciousness.
Oh, to the consciousness.
If you look at a family, you would hope that the mom and dad are more conscious than the kids.
Not some of these teenagers.
And so if you're at a playground and you're looking around, the mom and dad is going to be looking around, and they're going to be noticing things that the child is not going to notice. They should be, looking around, and they can see some things that look dangerous. And they're scanning that environment differently. So a child would not necessarily be having that kind of consciousness.
Right.
So when you're having a leadership conversation, you want to take into account the different levels of consciousness in the room. Some people are there merely in an organization, are there merely, punching a clock. Some people are there think of themselves as a leader. Some people are there are really, focused on society and the impact that the product can make in society. So you want to be able to have conversations that includes all people and elevates the conversation from where it is, and elevate and bring a possibility for the bigger consciousness in the room.
I love that.
That's where you get to beyond your best.
I love that. So you get beyond your best by raising one of the absolutes of transformational leadership is to raise this level of conversation. Jim, in a few moments...
Let me just give you a quick example.
Sure.
The easy conversation people can have in their homes or business would be simply, what matters here? Because we take off on all kinds of bunny trails, but if you get down to that one simple question, when you're talking about an issue, what really matters here, you'll see that it's a higher conscious question, and it brings in a whole different fabric in the answers. So that's an example of what I mean. Or if you're trying to make a decision at home, you go back to your value system. You go, well, what would matter here?
Oh, I love that, and this is certainly a topic that we can address on its own. Look, Jim, in the few moments we have, I want to complete with a few things, but I've got to ask you about this movie, The Absolute Answer to Everything. Now, how did that come up, and could you share a little bit about it?
Well, a friend of mine had is a movie director. Another friend of mine is a facilitator and a dear friend of mine, and they'd had been thinking about this for years. And a couple of the movies in the spirituality genre had shown up recently, and I think that got them excited about it. And we wanted to talk about and demonstrate. I mean, what this movie is really about is about people in a documentary sort of style who are taking success principles, who are taking universal laws and actually applying them to their life. And so we want to take it from a theoretical into a practical, because, people are talking about the law of attraction. Some people say, if you sort of believe it, it'll show up. And I know you've got to take action aligned with the intention. So there's a lot of new information in this movie. And the answer to absolutely everything is being. That's the answer that's focused in this movie.
So I've got
how people are using being to produce unprecedented results.
Is there a timeline when this movie is to be out on for people to go see it? I know we're sitting here in October of the year 2007.
You can go to the website gettheanswer.org, and it will be out on DVD.
Yeah, let's repeat that. Gettheanswer.org.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it will be out on DVD October 15th. And if you want to find out more about my program, which aligns with this movie, that would be beyondyourbest.com. And we offer, monthly workshops for people. People fly in. And local, we are located in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yeah. And you've got people flying in from all over the world, maybe, or certainly just this country?
Mostly this country. Now, I facilitate all over the world. I'm going to Russia in a couple months to do a workshop up over there. So,
do you speak Russian?
No.
No. but okay, very good. But I'm sure your training is highly interactive, and you speak.
I have a translator standing right next to me.
Oh, you have the translator. Well, that would be interesting. Jim, if people would like to reach you and call you and speak with you, is there a number that you would be willing to give out?
That number, you could call my office at 317-522-5455.
317-522.
5455.
Okay. We've been speaking with Jim Zarvos, who's the president and founder of Paradigm Consulting International, which is a consulting firm that specializes in shaping high-performance teams and leadership development. Jim, in closing, I want to introduce something that I call thinking points for connecting forward. I want to take what we just did, this conversation that you and I just had, and what do I need to be thinking about for me to move forward, for me to get more centered, more being, and to get beyond my best? What do I need to think about?
You need to think about what matters and what matters in the present.
What matters and what matters in the present. Jim, thank you so. That was great. I got to remember that because that is what's important to us in the now, so to say. Jim, what a pleasure to be with you today, and thanks so much. For those that need to reach Jim Zarvos, that's 317-522-5455. His website is beyondyourbest.com, and the absolute answer to everything, a new movie that Jim is featured in, is, I guess you said, Jim, it was gettheanswer.org?
Yes.
And thanks so much, Jim. And thank you, everybody, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. You're welcome, Jim.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Networking. For more information or to subscribe to this podcast, visit smallbizamerica.com.